for our weekend recap. We had a couple of fights this weekend, and the first one we're going to cover is the fight between former WBO heavyweight champion Joseph Parker against seasoned journeyman contender and veteran Alex Leapai. Now, as far as what the fight looked like, the aesthetic of the fight, its characteristics, it's everything that I envisioned. That Alex Leapai, at this stage in his career, he's got a very straightforward approach. There aren't many nuances to it. He's a guy who wants to walk his man down, get close to him, stay with him, and look for one big shot to end the fight. And as a result of an approach like that from what is a 38, 39-year-old fighter, as a result of that approach, which is very crude, you know, there aren't too many details to it, not too many nuances. As a result of that approach coming from a fighter that age, he's prone to taking punishment coming through the front door, and that's very much what we saw in this fight. Joseph Parker, he's working on things right now. He's in a transitional phase, the second stage of his career. He's working on things that have costed him in big situations in the past, mainly showing more aggression, being a busier fighter overall. And in this fight, you know, that's what he did. He made good on his word. He made good on his promise that he was going to look for the knockout. He came out guns blazing, throwing combinations, ripping shots to the body, nice uppercuts in the phone booth. This wasn't a complacent Joseph Parker, so in that way, he made good on his word. But the interesting thing about it was that Alex Leapai
showed a good chin.
Proved to be more durable, more game than anticipated. I mean, this guy is losing virtually every single round, but he never stopped trying. He never stopped coming forward. Even after getting his nose busted, he's getting outworked, he's getting outboxed, outmaneuvered. Nothing is going this man's way, and in spite of being a fighter in the latter stages of his career, having racked up 7 professional losses, 8 now,
after yesterday,
being a fighter who's, 38 years old, he showed great punch resistance because he did his best to hang in there. I had the fight ending anywhere inside of 5 rounds, whereas, it took the ref about 10 to finally just wave this thing off. And I know that there are going to be people that look at that stoppage and think to themselves, well, Alex Leapai, he didn't look hurt. He looked like he could have went on. But went on to do what? Is my question. Went on to do what? Continue to get punched in the face? Continue to get outworked and outlanded? I mean, I understood the referee's stoppage in the sense that, look, this has been a one-sided contest throughout. 10 rounds in, this guy's not showing anything new, anything different. He's still clearly being outmaneuvered, outworked, outlanded. His nose is busted, so you might as well just wave the thing off. And in that way, I understood the referee's stoppage. Overall, if I had to grade Parker's performance in this fight, did he follow through on what he said he was going to do? Did he show aggression? Was he a busier, more aggressive fighter? Yes, he most certainly was. So in that way, I'd grade his performance about a B. If he would have got Leapai out of there early, somewhere inside of 5, maybe a B+, depending on the fashion, maybe an A. But I'd give it a B. Leapai, he did try to make him work for it. The fight lasted much longer than I anticipated, but overall, it was everything that I thought it was going to be. So Parker met my expectations. That Joseph Parker, the one complaint that people have had about him is that he doesn't, hit the gas, that this is a guy who clearly knows what he's doing in there, great defensive prowess, but he needs to show more aggression, that at times he just comes off as being complacent, being very much content doing just enough. So what he exhibited in this fight was a good balance of offense and defense. He's definitely going in there. He's definitely mixing it up. He's looking for the kill, but he's not compromising defense as a result of that, and that's what he needs to exhibit more of. So he's definitely taking a step in the right direction. You'll notice that in spots, when Leapai, he's in proximity, he's within range to land a big overhand shot, Parker would either slip it, roll it, or get under it, staying out of range of it. But he was still the aggressor. He was still the busier fighter in the fight. And that's what he needs more of, to silence the critics, to silence the naysayers, and to, potentially win the big fights. Because I reiterate, Parker is a well-rounded boxer, but somewhere along the line, he became gun-shy, he became bashful. And, Kevin Barry's got to break him out of that. I think he's doing a good job. I think that so long as Parker is aware that he needs to show a bit more moxie fight by fight, he may yet become a world champion again. Who knows what the future holds? So I will say it was what I expected. Parker met my expectations, and in that way, can't complain about what I saw. We then come to the middleweight title fight, the WBO middleweight title fight between middleweight champion Demetrius Andrade and contender Macias Sulecki. There were some elements of this fight that I was correct about. I was right to pick Demetrius Andrade on points. I was even right to suggest that there's going to be a knockdown in this fight. At minimum, there's going to be one. But what I was wrong about was that the fight would be competitive. This fight was anything but competitive. Assessing Andrade's performance in this fight really depends on who you ask. There are people out there that think he looks sensational in shutting out Macias Sulecki. I mean, he didn't just win this thing, he won it wide on points. You know, it's arguable whether or not Sulecki even won a round in this thing. But there are other people out there who have a difference of opinion. They feel that Andrade looks sloppy out there. Those looping shots could be countered by a more capable fighter than Macias Sulecki. There are those people. Now, myself, I'm not one of those people. I'm of the opinion that Demetrius Andrade went out there and put on a stellar performance, looked sensational, doing what he does best. You gotta understand, this is not your conventional kind of fighter. This is a fighter with a very herky-jerky, awkward style where he uses a wide range of motion to offset the other guy's aggression. And he does this in a variety of ways, whether he's slipping shots, rolling shots, or dipping really low from a wide stance. This guy has a lot of tools in the tool bag. Thus, he can go about offsetting the other guy's aggression in a wide variety of ways. You know, people are more accustomed to your upright, 1-2 kind of fighter, basic kind of fighter with a very predictable approach, whereas Demetrius Andrade is anything but predictable. This guy fires shots from a variety of angles, and those angles are not conventional angles because this is not your conventional fighter. But if your intention is to gauge his performance against Macias Sulecki, was it a good showing? Was it a bad showing? What exactly did this particular fight communicate about Demetrius Andrade? How do you rate his performance? Well, need I remind you that the guy that he squared off against last night is the same guy that gave Daniel Jacobs a very competitive fight. He was able to make it competitive against the Miracle Man. The Miracle Man who's far more proven at this weight than Demetrius Andrade is. I mean, did we forget that Daniel Jacobs starched Peter Quillin, former WBO middleweight champion Peter Quillin, in just one round?
He's proven.
Did we forget that
He's proven.
Daniel Jacobs also had a very competitive fight with Gennady Golovkin? Okay, competitive fight with that guy. 12 rounds of action. Finished the fight on his feet. Picked himself up off the deck. Essentially, what I'm communicating here is Macias Sulecki is a solid guy. And because he's a solid guy, he was able to make it competitive against Daniel Jacobs, a proven fighter at the weight.
Pay attention.
Whereas with Demetrius Andrade, he was unable to make it competitive. He wasn't able to get to that guy the way he was able to get to Daniel Jacobs. So if you're assessing the performance, not forecasting an outcome, not trying to employ a triangle theory, but simply assessing a performance, was it a good showing or was it a bad showing? Well, as far as middleweight standards go, you'd have to say that Andrade dropping this guy early in the fight, getting a lot of respect in the process, I might add, Andrade dropping this guy early in the fight and effectively shutting him out throughout the duration of the fight is in fact a stellar performance. You know, Andrade hasn't been at middleweight very long, but because he's a more active fighter these days than he was as a junior middleweight, he continues to improve. He continues to become a sharper fighter, a more put together product. And the more active he is, the more he benefits from it. It's not like this is a fight where he sustained a lot of punishment, he's been through a war, he might have to take some time off. No, he's consistently shutting these guys out and getting better and better in the process. It's just that when you have an unconventional fighter that has an unconventional and awkward style, it is sometimes hard to gauge. You imagine that style, or you try to, against some other of the fighters out there, and you tell yourself that, you know, you can't afford to do that with this guy, or you can't afford to do that with that guy. And I get that, you know, there's a precedence for that kind of an opinion. But what you've got to understand is that that kind of an unconventional and awkward style can make a guy gun shy, can make a guy not understand what's in front of him. He doesn't understand when he should or shouldn't let his hands go. He is being controlled by that awkward, unconventional fighter in all the ways that Sulecki was being controlled by Demetrius Andrade, who very much was the ring general. I mean, he was playing with this guy the way a 3-year-old plays with his spaghetti. He was just having fun out there with the guy. And, you know, that's saying a lot because Daniel Jacobs, he actually had to work for it, whereas a Demetrius Andrade, he just had fun with it. So in terms of assessing a performance, I'd say that it was a stellar showing for Andrade. I mean, the premise that we rate performances is, whether or not the guy was in trouble, how much control did he exhibit, and when we look at this performance from Demetrius Andrade, however unconventional his style might be, this was a fight where he was in control from the opening bell to the final bell. He managed to drop the guy. The guy had very limited to no success, round by round. So as far as performances go, this was yet another dominant and stellar performance from what is an awkward, herky-jerky, unorthodox kind of fighter, but an effective fighter nonetheless. So hats off to Demetrius Andrade for what is yet another successful title defense of what is his WBO middleweight title. And finally, we move on to the Richard Commey versus Ray Beltran IBF lightweight title fight, which took place the night before. A fight that I described as a gunfight. That this isn't going to be a chess match by any stretch of the imagination, because both of these guys are two aggressive kinds of fighters that look forward to the exchanges, relish the opportunity to make it aggressive, make it a gunfight. But in a gunfight, Comey just so happens to have the bigger guns. And, quite honestly, he's the younger guy. That does have its role to play. In the fight, we saw the resilience of Ray Beltran, which I described. The resilience, the veteran tactics, and the willingness to engage. But ultimately, his heart wants him to do more than his body would allow him. With Richard Comey's firepower, it would prove to be too much for Ray Beltran. And that's what we saw about, 3, 4 knockdowns? The fight itself and its aesthetic really was everything that I expected. But what really is worth reflecting upon are those moments where Richard Commey would overextend himself, how much he would commit to his power shots, and how much of his defense he would compromise as a result. Because while, Ray might have got dropped 3, 4 times or whatever, that's not saying that he didn't have success of his own in spots. And that success that he had was as a result of Richard Commey overcommitting to those power shots, leaving himself open to be caught between the punches. That's worth reflecting upon ahead of what could be a Teofimo Lopez fight. A fight with a fighter who packs a comparable, if not bigger than punch, than Comey's punch. The Commey, he hits plenty hard. He's a guy, you gotta be careful around this guy. You don't want this guy chinning you. But power punches aside, there are holes, defensive lapses in judgment on the part of Richard Commey to be addressed, because those are the kind of holes that could see him getting hurt, that could see him getting stopped. Stopped by the likes of a power puncher like Teofimo Lopez. You might have noticed in the fight that, while Commey was pouring it on, he managed to punch himself out, and when he did, Ray Beltran found himself getting back into the fight. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a defensive lapse in judgment. That you can have world-class power, but if you're not expeditious with it, judicious with it, you may blow through your own energy reserves and end up paying for it in the process. Now, maybe Richard Commey could have afforded to get away with that against Ray Beltran this past weekend.
Against him, yeah.
But ahead of what could be a fight with Teofimo Lopez, I gather that those are mistakes that Richard Commey can't afford to make. Essentially, this weekend's fight between Beltran, the outcome wasn't really a surprise. Very entertaining fight with a very entertaining aesthetic. That much I can say. It was fantastic from start to finish. A very entertaining matchup. But those things aside, the most that fight left us to reflect upon are the defensive lapses in judgment from Commey and how that could cost him that IBF title in the very near future. If Teofimo Lopez makes his way past Nakatani in that IBF eliminator, that lines these two guys up for a fight. And you go hyperextending your punches, lunging in, overcommitting to your shots, swinging for the fences and hitting nothing but air. You do that with Teofimo, and I have no doubts that he could make you pay for it in ways that Ray Beltran could not. Not saying a lot, because Ray's a tough customer. Ray didn't stay down. I didn't think he would stay down. I thought ahead of the fight that it was going to take some work, and it did take some work. But if Ray Beltran can push you, can pose resistance, just imagine what a hungry young fighter like Teofimo Lopez can do. A fighter who has got to get through you to get to who he really wants, Vasyl Lomachenko. All in all, it was a very entertaining weekend of fights. And I'll say that Richard Commey, he did his job. You want a greatest performance? I'd say, somewhere between a B and a B minus, because he got the job done the way I expected him to get the job done. But, there were some things to be addressed there. Now, as far as that Charlo versus Adams fight, we're going to cover that in our next video, because there is a lot to be addressed in regards to that fight and what the hot topics are in the sport of boxing relative to that fight and that fighter. Overall, it was a good, entertaining weekend of fights, different style matchups, but, nothing to complain about.